Welcome to the next in our series of interviews with cybersecurity thought leaders on the subject of cybersecurity career intelligence. We put these interviews together to help people that are new to the field or people that are transitioning into the field navigate how to get a better job or how to get an initial job, how to get a toehold in the cybersecurity field. And today we have a very distinguished thought leader in cybersecurity. He's going to talk about the field and his recent book. So welcome, Sami Saydjari. Did I get your name pronounced right? Or
pretty close,
Saydjari. Saydjari. Okay, apologies.
No problem.
Thank you so much for joining. As I said, Sami has a very interesting book, Engineering Trustworthy Systems. It's not brand new. It came out in 2018, if I read correctly. But I read a lot of books in cybersecurity, and this is one of the few that really reached out as something that could help educate the reader in terms of cybersecurity. So before we even get into the book, Sami, could you talk a little bit about what you do now? What is your role? What company do you work for? And who do you interact with on a daily basis?
Excellent. Yes. So I am a cybersecurity architect, and I do architectures for sort of next generation systems, improved systems for major defense and national security organizations. And we also do some risk assessment as in a small consultancy that I run. So we sort of figure out where the risk comes from and then figure out how to address it, and then create roadmaps about how organizations can sensibly invest their money to get the best defense that they possibly can muster.
Outstanding. So in writing the book, what led you to write this book? I think it's close to 600 pages. It's not like a weekend endeavor here. So obviously you had some serious motivation to do it. What did you see was not out there in terms of cybersecurity books, and what niche did you try to fill in this book?
Great question. So I think there's a lot of great material out there about the specifics, about the how-tos, about how to configure a firewall, and there's a lot of engineers out there that are good at that. And I'm glad to have them out there. But what I've run into amongst my colleagues and both senior and junior people, it's just they don't quite understand the principles behind what they're doing. And so they may be able to sort of vaguely grasp them, but nobody's sat down and said, here are the cybersecurity systems engineering principles that really are timeless, right? That they don't change with the next cool virus that comes out. They don't change with the next Trojan horse, or even in a technology challenge like cloud, right? I mean, cloud's very interesting and it has some interesting implications, but the basics are the same. The principles are the same. And so my endeavor was to do this timeless, principled systems engineering book that that every student, in my viewpoint, who is cybersecurity, and every professional should understand the principles underlying what they're doing.
I totally agree, and I think you did accomplish that. So I'm wondering if I could ask you some questions to kind of put this even more in context. So if I look at the title of the book here, it's Engineering Trustworthy Systems. So I have a few questions about that. So did you cover all topics in the book? Are there some topics not in the book specifically? And also, you talked about trustworthy, right? So I don't think the word cybersecurity in here. It's in
Nope.
small print. But did you distinguish between trustworthy systems and secure systems? And do you are there other topics in the sort of broader cybersecurity field that are not in the book and that people would need to learn about in addition to what's in the book?
Yes. So let's see, that was 8 questions, but I think I can handle them. So,
Right.
so yes, there's a lot of material that's not in the book. So as you mentioned, sort of, I'm looking for the niche of what's not out there, the sort of the principles that are not the details, right? There's no need for me to cover the details. Ross Anderson does a nice job in his book, Security Engineering, uncovering a lot of really interesting mechanisms. So he's got an encyclopedia of mechanisms. Everybody should read Ross Anderson's book. It's great, but it's an encyclopedia of mechanisms. It really isn't how I, as an engineer, how you as an engineer, figuring out how to design something. What do we do with those mechanisms? How do we take that library of building blocks at our disposal and put them together in a sensible way at a sensible budget? So that's really what the book is about. So anything that's out there, firewall configurations, even ethical hacking. So I talk about, for example, the adversarial mindset, but at a strategic level, not at an ethical hacking, because you can take an ethical hacking course. So if there's an ethical hacking book out there, and there's probably 30 ethical hacking books out there, of which 4 or 5 are great. So you should read those in addition to the book. So this to me is core knowledge, right? And then the other stuff decorates around it. So I would teach this first if I were designing a curriculum, so I have a framework of principle on which I can hang this other ancillary knowledge that will change year to year, whereas the principles should be timeless.
Right. So one of my other sub questions was trustworthy. Is that term? Does people talk about resilient? In fact, we have 3 courses on resilient systems in our program. We don't have anything on trustworthy systems. Is that kind of a term of art, or is there some overlap between that and some of these other terms that are out there?
Yeah, so in security, there are really 2 things. There's functional security and there's assurance. And I have come to deeply respect the reliability community and the merger between reliability and security, which at least the subpart of the community calls dependability. And I think the property of assurance, that is to say, our confidence that it has the properties that we want it to have, whether they be reliability properties or security properties. Say, in some sense, reliability it's about failure, unintentional, accidental, random failure, whereas security is also about failure, but intentional, non-random, which requires somewhat a different approach, but some of the same concepts apply. And so trustworthiness is meant, engineering, the first word means I want to make a discipline out of this, right? We're not playing around, we're not hacking, we're not just trying to put the next widget into the system because some cool widget salesman says it's the next cool thing, right? I want to have an engineering discipline. Trustworthy means I want to have confidence, right? I want to engineer to a confidence standard, like a bridge builder, builds a bridge to the confidence that it's not going to fall down, when the first truck drives over it. And systems is, I want to have a broad perspective. I'm not interested in the narrow pieces because they're important, but other books cover it. But how I put together the whole thing into a system of systems.
Yeah, I think that's important. People I've talked to always say you need to look at security as a system. You just can't fix one piece of it and then some other problem will come up. But it turns out our master's program in cybersecurity is in the School of Engineering. But how would you, is it a discipline, do you think, that people not originally in the engineering field can grasp? Because people coming into our program might come from criminal justice, they may come from other fields, and so is this something people can learn, do you think? New people coming into the field, and what do they need to do to learn to think of it as an engineering discipline?
Yeah, so I think my book is written. It's written by an engineer, right? So I'm a master's level engineer and a bachelor's computer science. So I think computer science and engineering are equally important, and there's 2 chapters specifically on the principles for computer science and engineering and how they apply. So really, it's for people who are engineers who are trained in the discipline of engineering and systems engineering more broadly. That's not to say, for example, that people outside of the engineering field don't have a lot to contribute to cybersecurity. And we talk about, for example, out-of-the-box thinking. So for example, when we brainstorm on attacks and strategically, taking apart an organization from a sort of a whiteboarding top-level strategic viewpoint, I like having the theater major in the room. I like having the criminal justice because they have a different they have a different perspective on things. And so these folks can really contribute to the strategic analysis, to the intelligence analysis, even to the design process to say, what do we need, right? The requirements analysis. So yes, these all sorts of people. The more perspectives we have, the better. And in some sense, the book is about weaving these multiple perspectives together, top down, bottom up, and from the left and from the right.
Yeah, I think that's good. So in terms of what sort of background would people need to even take a course or pick up and start reading this book? So when I look at it, I don't think you have to have a bachelor's degree in engineering necessarily. I think it has a broader audience. And this also relates to sort of getting into the field itself. How would you, where would you use this book in your career path, let's say? I'm assuming you don't need a bachelor's degree in engineering to pick up the book, but maybe you can confirm or elaborate on that.
Yeah, no, I take that as a huge compliment that you said that because it was written that way, right? I mean, I have made a career out of communicating very complex ideas because what I realized is that engineering is at least half about convincing managers to do the right thing. And you have to speak the language that managers speak, and they're not always cybersecurity experts. And so the book is written in this odd language called English. And there's no jargon. I mean, okay, there's a little jargon, and I provide some jargon just so the engineers have context and they know how to listen to people who speak jargon and understand what they're really talking about. But it's intended to be jargon free. So no, you don't need a bachelor's degree. And you can be a manager. So it's written for people who consume cybersecurity as well as produce it. Part of it is intended that you read it so you know the intelligent questions to ask. Let's say you're a CEO or a CIO. What intelligent questions do you ask of the vendors or your CSO or your IT department?
What do you need besides, you want to have some work experience, a reasonable resume, you want to hopefully get our master's degree program, you want to read Sami's book. What else, how would you integrate all of this into a package, either a resume, or what do you need to do to get that first security job?
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, a degree from an institution that's highly qualified to do the course is important. Doesn't matter which institution, that you've got one, right? And that you sort of understand the basics. That's critical. Some certifications are critical. CISSP tends to be sort of a basic I mean, it's sort of like hygiene. You should wash your hands and take a bath every day, right? So you should have a CISSP. I don't consider that to be more than just hygiene, but people are looking for that box. And there's a few other certifications out there, maybe a half a dozen. You can probably do most of these in guerrilla courses over weekends. So, maybe 4 or 5 certifications. Read my book, right? Have a strong understanding of system engineering. Having an IT background where you understand how the IT works is fantastic, right? So particularly if you have a diversity of experience, right? So if you're a sysadmin and you're also, do operations and you've done some design and maybe you've done some testing and maybe you've even done some ethical hacking stuff. All right, so now if I were looking at that resume, I'd say this person really understands how the infrastructure works, even if they're not a security expert yet. And oh, look, they've got a master's degree and they've got, all these certifications. Yeah, I would hire that person immediately, particularly if they have like 10 years of experience in IT, because they understand what they're securing, right? Because people who just understand security without understanding the realities of how IT really works, less interesting, right? Academics, who are academically secure but don't really understand the engineering trade-offs of, money and time and mission, they're less capable in my viewpoint. So experience.
What things do you do, or what would you recommend that people do to try to keep up with the field? Are there specific groups to be members of, specific websites or URLs that, there's so much information out there. Can you maybe in 30 seconds kind of curate it down to what are your top sources to keep up with this field?
That's a great question. There's actually too many. I see IEEE Security and Privacy is great for research. The Aerospace Conference is great for applications. The Applications Conference that's held annually. is, so those two conferences, Black Hat, DEF CON is great for you should always understand where the hackers are and what they're thinking. So I would attend one of those every year. IEEE Security and Privacy Magazine's great because it's a lot of accessible articles with research and development and operations. So a lot of good stuff in those magazines. Probably another 2, 3 that I can't think of off the top of my head, but between all of that, that should keep you fairly current.
That's good. Thank you. I'm glad to hear we're kind of following some of the same stuff here. So thank you so much, Sami, for joining and sharing your thoughts. And thank you all for watching and listening. And see you again next week in the next Cybersecurity Intelligence interview. Have a good afternoon.